The movie starts with three school bullies, led by a student named Miles. These bullies attend school solely to pick on those they consider weak.
You looking at, fat boy?
One of their frequent targets is a chubby boy named Jimmy Mulligan. Despite enduring Miles's constant bullying, Jimmy never fights back. At school, Jimmy has two loyal friends, Andy and Bobby, both of whom are seen as losers at school.
That guy is a fucking douchebag.
Over time, their endless taunts and insults begin to wear Jimmy down. Jimmy's mother senses that something is wrong, but Jimmy refuses to tell her about his struggles after school.
Is everything all right?
Everything's fine, Mom.
His friends invite him to hang out and relax, but Jimmy declines. He knows there's a chance he might run into Miles since they live in the same neighborhood. However, things don't go as planned. One day, while Jimmy and his friends are on their way to school, they unexpectedly encounter Miles and his gang. Miles and his crew demand $100 from Jimmy, a sum that is clearly beyond his reach given his humble background. Despite Jimmy's attempts to explain that he doesn't have that kind of money, Miles becomes increasingly aggressive, continuing to pressure Jimmy for the cash.
The $100 preventing me and my boy here from fucking you up?
Just as things start to escalate, Miles notices Vinny watching them from a distance and momentarily backs off. Vinny is known as a tough fighter with many dangerous connections. He doesn't approve of Miles and his gang picking on others, and he always keeps a close eye on them. Due to Vinny's reputation, even the bullies are afraid of him. In addition to picking on Jimmy, Miles frequently bullies Bobby for his more feminine way of expressing himself. After Miles publicly humiliates Bobby in front of the entire class, Jimmy tries to comfort his friend.
Remember what you said, man. They're just douchebags.
I'm fed up with these assholes. I deal with enough shit already.
He then invites Andy and Bobby to join him for lunch in the cafeteria, promising to treat them. When Andy and Bobby see Jimmy devouring large portions of food, they are shocked. However, they never tease him about his appetite. Later on, Andy and Bobby try to set Jimmy up with a girl named Adrian from their school. While having lunch together in the cafeteria, they often notice Adrian sneaking glances at Jimmy. Shortly after, Miles appears again, sitting beside Jimmy and demanding the $100 he previously asked for. One student, irritated by Miles's disruptive presence, speaks up and asks him to stop causing trouble and leave the cafeteria.
Why don't you just leave the kid alone?
Miles responds by yelling and harshly reprimanding the student, whom he sees as weak. However, another student, larger and stronger than Miles, decides to teach him a lesson for causing a scene. In an instant, Miles's bravado disappears, and he hurriedly leaves the cafeteria. After school, Miles confronts Jimmy once more, demanding the money. Jimmy stands his ground, insisting that he doesn't owe Miles anything. As such, he feels no obligation to give him any cash.
I don't owe you anything.
You must want to get fucked up, don't you?
Hearing Jimmy's defiance, Miles wastes no time and attacks him on the roadside. Just as Miles is about to finish the beating, an elderly man arrives, threatening to call the police. Startled, Miles quickly flees the scene. The elderly man, who introduces himself as Mr. Action, takes Jimmy to his home to tend to his injuries. At Mr. Action's house, Jimmy notices a picture of a boxer on the wall and is surprised to learn that Mr. Action was once a national boxing champion. Filled with determination, Jimmy begs Mr. Action to train him in boxing so he can stand up to Miles and end the bullying once and for all. Though willing to help, Mr. Action admits that he is too old to train Jimmy himself, but he promises to reach out to some friends to help with Jimmy's training. A little later, Mr. Action takes Jimmy home, where his parents are horrified to see their son with a black eye. Mr. Action explains what happened and brings up the idea of self-defense lessons. Initially skeptical, Jimmy's parents ask for some time to think it over. In the next scene, there is a knock on Mr. Action's door. When he opens it, he sees Jimmy with both eyes now bruised.
So, what'd you have in mind?
Jimmy's parents, realizing the gravity of the situation, are grateful for Mr. Action's care and immediately allow Jimmy to start boxing training. Under Mr. Action's guidance, they even accompany Jimmy to Manny's Boxing Training Center, a gym and boxing facility run by one of Mr. Action's friends.
I was hoping you could teach Jimmy here to defend himself.
Mr. Action briefly explains Jimmy's situation to Manny.
He's just been hit in the head too many times.
Impressed by Jimmy's determination, Manny agrees to help, on the condition that Jimmy takes his training seriously and never gives up. With the rigorous boxing training, Jimmy seizes the opportunity and begins regularly practicing with Manny, while Mr. Action closely monitors his progress during each session. In one of their conversations, Jimmy confides in Mr. Action about Miles's ongoing demand for the $100. In response, Mr. Action proposes a plan. Jimmy should increase Miles's demand to $200, but on one condition: he must be given a month to prepare. Mr. Action believes that in the span of a month, Jimmy can acquire the skills needed to defeat Miles, thereby avoiding having to hand over the $200.
We need at least a month of hard work for starters.
The next day, when Miles returns for his money, Jimmy claims he has found a good after-school job and will be paid in a month.
If you just wait a couple of weeks, instead of the $100 I owe you, I'll give you 200.
Miles considers the long time, but eventually agrees, temporarily relieving the pressure. For the first time in a while, Jimmy doesn't have to endure Miles constantly pestering him for money. However, during his afternoon boxing session with Manny, Jimmy seems sluggish and uninspired. He claims to be tired, but Manny, with his keen professional eye, sees through it. He knows that Jimmy's exhaustion is more mental than physical. Concerned, Manny speaks to Mr. Action about Jimmy's emotional state, expressing his worry that Jimmy isn't taking the training seriously.
I don't know what's wrong with you, boy. I don't think he wants to be here.
On their way home, Mr. Action asks Jimmy why he seems so down that day. In response, Jimmy admits he feels tired and frustrated, believing all his efforts in training are pointless. He still feels weak in the face of Miles's bullying, unable to stand up for himself.
And then after all this, I might just get my ass kicked again.
Hearing Jimmy's discouragement, Mr. Action tries to lift his spirits, reassuring him that no effort will be wasted, regardless of the outcome. He tells Jimmy that the lessons he learns from his hard work will be valuable in the long run. Later, back at home, Jimmy's father notices his waning enthusiasm for training. Without pressuring him, his father leaves the decision entirely up to Jimmy, but expresses his hope that one day Jimmy can teach his own children how to defend themselves so they won't suffer the same fate.
You can teach your kids someday, and they won't have to go through what you're going through now.
Reflecting on his father's words, Jimmy's determination reignites, and he resolves to take his training much more seriously. The next day, Miles and his gang once again try to intimidate Jimmy and his friends. This time, they go as far as beating Bobby in front of the crowd. Jimmy approaches Bobby, who is crying alone, and tries to console him. However, Bobby, in despair, feels powerless against Miles and his gang.
What could you have possibly done? The teachers can't do anything.
Jimmy disagrees and tells Bobby he has a plan to defeat Miles and end the bullying once and for all. After returning home, Jimmy eagerly hops on his bike and rushes to Manny's boxing gym, despite usually relying on Mr. Action for transportation due to the gym's distance. Mr. Action is thrilled to see Jimmy's newfound enthusiasm for training. However, in his excitement, Jimmy accidentally bumps into Manny and falls to the ground. Manny isn't angry. In fact, he is pleased to see Jimmy so committed to boxing again. Day after day, Jimmy trains with unwavering determination and burning passion. Manny intensifies Jimmy's regimen with stricter physical exercises and incorporates elements of mixed martial arts into the training. Meanwhile, Mr. Action nurtures Jimmy's mental fortitude, offering advice and inspiration to fuel his fighting spirit. At school, Jimmy confides in Andy about his boxing training and his mission to defeat Bounce. It is at that moment that Adrian approaches Jimmy, and the two agree to go on a date. They attend a party at a friend's house, and during an intimate conversation, Jimmy and Adrian discover a strong connection and compatibility. As they become engrossed in various discussions, they decide to pursue a romantic relationship. While Jimmy enjoys his newfound relationship, Eddie, one of Miles's close friends, begins to provoke and insult Jimmy and Adrian.
Fat boy and his misfit girlfriend.
However, brimming with confidence, Jimmy stands up to Eddie and swiftly forces him to back off. Time passes quickly, and soon the day arrives when Jimmy is to fulfill his promise to face Miles. But this time, Jimmy is determined not to allow Miles to extort or bully him any longer. That morning, he wakes up with unshakable confidence and resolve. Upon arriving at school, Miles immediately approaches Jimmy, threatening to harm his friends if he dares break his promise or try to run away.
What the fuck are you looking at?
In the bathroom, Jimmy runs into a young man named Vinny, who has heard about his ongoing feud with Miles. Vinny knows that Jimmy has been training at Manny's gym and offers words of encouragement, wishing him good luck in his upcoming confrontation.
Kick his fucking ass.
Unbeknownst to Jimmy and Vinny, Eddie overhears their conversation from a nearby bathroom stall and quickly reports back to Miles. Acting on Miles' instructions, Eddie reaches out to a notorious troublemaker known as Glassjaw Billy and arranges for him to challenge Jimmy at school. Word of the impending showdown between Jimmy and Miles spreads quickly, drawing the attention of everyone eager to see who will come out on top. Confidently, Jimmy walks toward Miles and his gang. Miles has already realized that Jimmy won't cave to his demands for money, so he devises a plan to beat him with the help of Glassjaw. However, Vinny intervenes, sending his associates to kidnap Glassjaw, forcing Miles to face Jimmy alone.
Your friend? He ain't coming.
The fight begins. At first, Jimmy struggles to handle Miles's attacks. Nevertheless, he refuses to give in and soon begins countering Miles with his own strikes. Jimmy manages to evade Miles's blows, though he takes a hard hit to the face. But Jimmy is no longer the weak, overweight boy he once was. He is transformed into someone capable of defending himself, determined to become stronger in order to protect those who can't defend themselves. Seeing Miles grow increasingly desperate, his friends try to jump in and help. However, Andy and Bobby, who have been watching from the sidelines, refuse to stay silent. They join Jimmy in standing up to the bully, and together they fight back until they eventually defeat Miles. After winning the fight, Jimmy confronts Miles, urging him to stop bullying everyone at school.
You're gonna leave everyone alone. Not just me, not just my friends, but everyone.
But Miles seems indifferent to Jimmy's plea. On the other hand, Mr. Action, who has been watching the entire confrontation, feels immense pride for his pupil. Though Jimmy has regained his strength, Mr. Action realizes that he still has compassionate heart, something Jimmy hasn't fully recognized yet. The incident between Jimmy and Miles is quickly recorded by onlookers and uploaded to various social media platforms, going viral. The video garners widespread attention, even catching the interest of a local TV station, turning Jimmy's stand against the bully into a hot topic within the community. People applaud Jimmy for bravely standing up to his tormentors. His parents are also incredibly proud, knowing that their son can now stand his ground and won't be bullied anymore. The movie concludes by showing Jimmy, Andy, Bobby, and Adrian becoming more confident and the center of attention at school after successfully dismantling the group of bullies that had terrorized the students for so long. Never underestimate the power of someone who is often overlooked. Even a person who seems weak can surprise everyone and show they are far stronger than they appear.